Lovers, it is such a pleasure to be back with you as we kick off the new season for 2020. And today I've got with me Ntombi Mkhwanazi, otherwise known as Ibuku on YouTube, and she's here to discuss one of our faves. So, as is our custom, we start every book club with a quote, and today I'm going to give you a quote from Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She was a huge politician back in the day, and this quote, I think, sums up, I think, my impressions of the two books we're going to be discussing today and the women we're going to be discussing today. And it's simple, two lines, and it goes like this. To girls and women everywhere, I issue a simple invitation. My sisters, my daughters, my friends, find your voice. And that's from Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and that's how we'll kick off today's book club session. So today we're talking the Hlomu series. We're going to discuss book 2 and 3. We're a little bit nervous if we're going to be able to get through both books in the period of time we have today, but we are keen to get started. If you are tuning in, please let us know where you're watching from. Have you read any one of the Hlomu books and what your impressions are? So, and Tombi, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I echo your sentiments of us being a bit rusty, but I'm very excited for our chat today.
That's awesome. Okay, so book 2 is Zandile the Resolute. So if you read book 1, Hlomu the Wife, you will already know a little bit about who Zandile is and why she's important to the story. And the
Yeah.
synopsis or this book summary is very short. It says, Book 2 of the blockbuster series continues the story of the 8 Zulu brothers. Rich, handsome, powerful, dangerous, and one of the wealthiest and most powerful families in Johannesburg. Zandile is the wife of the first brother, Nkosana. Their love story is like a South African township Romeo and Juliet. Their families hate each other, but their love is so strong it endures all the hatred, the deaths, and even prison time. So, kicking it off with Zandile first, what were your first impressions of the book, Ntombi?
First impressions, I mean, when I started reading the book, it did take a while to get into Zandile as a character. I think the book setting was quite well done in just introducing the character, but just understanding her, knowing her relation to the rest of the brothers, and just unpacking her story. I think that took some doing. But eventually, I think about halfway through, that's when it started picking up for me. That's when I started, understanding the context of who Zandile was to this family, what she meant to Nkosana, and obviously her reintegration into the family and understanding where they are now as opposed to where they were when she went to prison. So interesting story, very different from Hlomu. But yeah, I think that was really my first impression of it.
Mm. Um, it's interesting you talk about the lag time, and I think what I totally agree with you. It took me a while to get into Zandile, and I didn't know whether it was because I had spent a couple of like a few months before picking up the Hlomu series again. So when I
Mm,
read the first book, it was like I couldn't put it down. A page turner, and this so. And my expectation was that it would be the same, but I'd forgotten
yeah,
how huge the cost to the series of books is, because
yeah,
you've got the seven brothers, then some of them have kids. Then by
yeah,
this time that Zandile has come, quite a few of them have partners. Then there's all the people they've gathered and attracted during their time or their rise to power in Johannesburg. So
yeah,
it was that, I think, was what I struggled with in getting into it, because this book kind of is like picks up
yeah,
almost where we left off. It's like a couple of months after Hlomu's had her youngest child, and so we're just thrown into that story. But there's an interesting pace, because, as you said, when you finally find your feet, um, while we're meeting the Zulu family at the height of their power, this is really kind of like that sequel book that gives you a lot of the background, like the deep,
definitely.
deep background. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I did also find that. What I also found interesting, to move on from first impressions, was then Zandile herself. So initially, I was like, I'm not getting how this girl is different from Hlomu. And I
Mm,
think one of the things was the narrative point of view. Dudu writes with a first person narrative. You can feel her
yeah,
in the tone of voice of the characters. And so there are times when you're like, there's an element of the way this person is speaking or coming across that's more of the author than it is true to the character.
mhm,
But then Zandile really comes to the fore as an older woman, a mature woman. You feel the weight of the 17 years. And you
yeah,
also feel it in, I think, two aspects for me, which is the choices she makes,
yeah,
and then the her comparison to Hlomu. So I think Hlomu was really the grounding force in the family as the wife, but
yeah,
Zandile, I think, is more the mother. And it is more pronounced in her absence and the trauma that that creates, as well as her reintegration into the family as a mother, and that almost friction and tension between her and Hlomu
yeah,
as the mother figures. And it's very interesting to me because I think the larger story that we then see through Zandile is while Hlomu shows us how women um, gain that respectability as the wife and all of the expectation associated with that and all of the cultural and social rights associated with that, I think we see that associated from a motherhood perspective. And it's very, very interesting because she's very old school. She's stuck almost in the past 17 years
yeah,
ago, and she's having to hit the ground running, but she's having to deal with her absence whilst establishing herself in the present at the same time. So
yeah.
that's how I found her. How did Zandile come across for you in this book?
Firstly, before I get into that, just to echo your point of us being introduced to a broader character base, right? You started to understand the brothers on a deeper level because obviously some of them have now grown up. So you need to understand the points of life that they're now experiencing, how that reflects on the whole family, and how their whole family unit starts coming together. So I definitely think in this book, we got deeper into the stories of each character. You kind of met a bit of everyone. And I guess maybe that's why it took long. Like you say, maybe that was the lag in actually getting into who Zandile is because we were still being introduced to all these
Mm,
different people.
mm,
Um, I think also for me, that is a bit of a reflection on Zandile's character. Yes, she knew all of them, but for her, it was also a reintroduction to all of these people that she had in her life, and she needs to meet them where they are now, right? Um, but I guess, a bit of an impression on who Zaza, as
mm,
the book says so fondly. For me, she came across as, apart from still stuck in the past, those little bits of pieces of what her personality is and who she is. She came across a bit edgy, and a bit of a mysterious character. Just in how I pick up how she would react to Unkosana. She
mm,
doesn't react in the now. She reacts with so many different perspectives of, I haven't been around for so long. You need to understand that my love has changed or my relationship to you has changed. So I think there was that sense of excitement in her character that it's not what you would think. And I quite enjoyed that. She is a bit of a fireball and a bit of an observer. For me, she came across quite raw as well.
mm,
I just didn't get this thing that this is a pretentious character. She's an observer. She sits back and listens, but she's a sharp reactor as well. So if you just step on her toes a bit, she will react, right? And we saw those in those violent moments, or erratic moments that she would have throughout the
mm,
story. Yeah, so at some point I think I felt like she was a bit of an owl when it came to the family. She was knowledgeable, yes, very cautious. She has a bit of a view into what really goes on with everyone. quite a unique view, and in some instances it's a bit of a sixth sense, because just
Mm.
looking at her and Hlomu, yes, has that motherly presence. She's
Mm.
family on a different level, but I think Zandile had a bit of just a deeper understanding of who this family is, where they
Mm.
come from. But again, she now needs to understand them in the modern world and where they are now. So yeah, I think her character really sat with me in that way. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and I think Zandile, I think there are also similarities, right? As you start to engage with the series, so you see that to be a Zulu wife, there's an element of being able to clean up the messes as they happen. And I think the wives have different ways of doing that.
Yeah,
Um, what I also found very interesting is, so there are commonalities, the sacrifices they all have to make, and they all look different. Because each, and I think that's where you see the relationship dynamic clearest, is
yeah,
the sacrifice Hlomu makes is different to the sacrifices Zandile makes. They're definitely paying a price for being involved with this chaotic, traumatized group of people.
yeah,
But they each pay the price for their love very differently, and it speaks a lot about the person they're in love with, and you begin to see, in this book, Mqele's vulnerability is a lot clearer because of the way Zandile is observing his relationship with his
yeah,
wife and
yeah.
how he is their dynamic. And so, like you said, she definitely is an observer. She's definitely the owl. Um, and then I just wanted to just touch on the love story. So, this whole series, everybody loves it. Everybody's always raving about it. And they're always talking about the love. And so, to me, Nkosana, much like his brothers, is quite a strong-willed man,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a man's man. And but there's also an element in which, in terms of the love story, it can be a bit tropey. He's also the overbearing, powerful man.
Yeah,
So we're getting echoes of what was in the first book. Where are you? What are we doing? I don't like this. The
yep,
intimidation, and if there's still the nuances of violence, but they're very different to what was in the first book.
yeah,
So again, I'm in a quandary. Like, what is Dudu saying about love? Because as per usual, it's an entertaining read. There's drama for days, the
yes.
revelations, the things we discover, the
Yeah,
conflicts that arise, the skirmishes that happen between different characters. I mean,
yeah,
do this, but like,
yeah,
what is the larger message about love, and what is the larger message about Black love? And I'm still in a quandary about that. And I hope when we get to book 4 next week, I'll be clearer in my thoughts about that. But what was the impression? What was your kind of take on the love story? The that huge theme when we're celebrating these books as love stories.
yeah. I think, I mean, obviously, very unique take on what we see love as, but also very real and authentic, because we know love comes in many different forms. For me, I think Kosana and Zandile's love story was a twist and turning moment all the time. You were never quite sure, what would come next with them. But they definitely had this very strong attraction to each other, very strong point of loyalty. I like how you mentioned how, Zandile's character also expresses this view of, as a Zulu wife, or as a wife, you need to learn to handle the chaos that comes with being with this man. And those tensions also play into their relationship, where she now has to stomach some of the things that have happened, deal with now having to relearn, or basically be a mother as well. So there were just so many different angles of what love looks like, and what love um challenges that she would face. So it left me quite concerned in the end, when it came to what does love actually look like? What does it mean? And to, love to what end? So I had a lot of concerns at the end of the book because I did still feel like Zandile, one, is still trying to find herself. Two, she's really trying to find herself in her relationship as well. And this being in motherhood, this being in her romantic relationship with Nkosana, it just left me with a lot of question marks, that I was hoping could kind of be unraveled in Naledi. But yeah,
Mm.
it's just a point of love that just left me with a lot of questions more than
Mm.
certainties, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's not helped by the way the book ends, right? So
Mm,
we end again sort of like with the same feelings we had with book one, like what if, but what about? But we haven't resolved this issue. What about the snake? What about this? And obviously in the context of it being a series, it makes sense. So you're hoping that by the time you get to book five, it will be cool. And then you also have your own right suspicions about some of these subplots and some of these side characters that have moved the plot along. Why it was that Zandile was
yeah,
arrested on her wedding day, and who was it? You have your thoughts and your theories, and it's quite clear because by the end of the book, you know who's hostile to who. But there are
yeah,
definitely bigger questions, and I think in true Dudu fashion, she's not saying to us, well, this is a love story that's going to change your life, and this is the kind of love you want to have. She's just like, this is how it is. And I always wonder then why it's so popular because I'm like, are people relating more to this kind of a love story than everything happens happily ever after and everything is all good, like are people relating more to this turmoil, or is it actually that gossipy side of us that loves a good soap opera and that loves a good drama?
yeah,
I will say this for the love story. I think the one question I did explore through the relationship of Zandile and Kosana is, can love change? And then, as you said,
mm,
there's her love as a mother that is put to the test. So they don't mince any words from the beginning. It's a big issue. It's the very first conflict that's had in the book, her first meeting with her children,
yeah,
and all of the tensions that are there. And so, does love change? And what does it take to change love?
yeah,
And if you've um, believed something about a person for a long time without hearing their side of the story, what does it look like to repaint the narrative of who that person is? And
yeah,
within that, then what role does forgiveness have to play in the love story, whether it's between, a mother and a child, or whether it's between a man and a woman? Because in that 17 years, a lot has happened. And a lot has happened in their family, their nucleus family, in Nkosana's and Zaza and the kids. A lot has happened, and they've also survived a big tragedy. That is her husband and children while she's been away. So it's a lot. So can love change, and and should love change, or does it grow as we grow as individuals? Because these people are also not the same as when she left. And if it grows, is it still love? Is it still the same thing? Are we still loving?
mm,
Um, are we still loving with the same passion and all of
mm,
those things? I think the way that Zaza's body has changed over the 17 years, the way that she's matured, the different experiences they've had, the new people that they've had in their lives is how we navigate that question of, can love change? Does it change? What does love look like after the honeymoon period, many, many years later? And what kind of traumas can be sustained in a loving relationship? But I feel like the Zulu boys, that's what it means to love them. Like you're gonna have to deal with some trauma. You're gonna have to deal with
yeah.
some drama.
It's a prerequisite. You're just not going to avoid it, right?
Yeah.
But I think that is a very great question to kind of round up the experience of
Mm,
this book is, can love change? How does it change? Does it even change? I think it really speaks to how the story has progressed. And again, in
mm,
those relationships, and the rekindling of love. How, if it does change, how do you then start nurturing it again to where it was, or a new form of an elevated form of the love? So I really love that.
Yeah. So we've got about 10 minutes till we wrap up the live. So let's just hop now into book 3 quickly.
Yes.
And that is Naledi, His Love. So Naledi, His Love, the synopsis goes, Naledi, like Hlomu and Zandile, comes to understand that loving one of the Zulu brothers, in her case, it's Kawe, that makes the earth move, means loving all of his dark and tumultuous past. And as much as she will enjoy the trappings that come with being the wife of one of those rich, handsome, powerful, and dangerous men, she must also live with the inherent danger that remains. So, again, we're in the same neighborhood, but I feel like here, for me, Naledi was a refreshing change of pace
Yeah.
from Zambile. And for me, it was because we get a bit more of that Hlomu feeling in terms of in the beginning, Dudu takes a lot more time to set up the relationship between just the two
a hundred
before
percent
they
agree
meet the
with you on
family.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
100%
that,
agree with you
yeah.
on that one. I think it really felt very much like Hlomu. Just you want to know more. You want to dive into their life story and unpack who this Naledi lady is, who Kawe is, and how they come together. So completely agree with you on that one.
Mm, mm. So I found that refreshing. So for
Mm,
me, the same, even though I was reading them like these two one after the other, that wait a minute, who's this guy and who's he? Like, what's the family tree thing again? It wasn't
mm,
as much of a quagmire to go through in the second book. And then I felt the echoes of the how we fell in love with Mkhwele in the first book.
yes,
And Kawe
the
from
calm.
yeah, in the last two books has not. I mean, he's kind of we've been looking at him, we've been side eyeing him through
Mm,
some of the flossies that he's been with,
yeah,
and so we're kind of like, we're right there with Naledi when he starts in typical Zulu man fashion, and I'm talking about the Zulu brothers. Like he's almost love bombing, and we're just kind of like, but we know you, like you're just one of those playboys. So
yeah,
I found it really nice. I found the pace quicker, um, and the 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 courtship or the pursuit much more. And I think this is maybe what I was missing in Zandile, because in Zandile we don't get the same sense of that courtship. Where it's just her on her own. So for
yeah,
me, that was my first impression. I was like, oh, this is quicker. This is much more paced. And for me, even the writing style seemed a little bit more crisp and lively and better and sort of smooth than
yeah,
the previous book. So that was kind of my first impression
yeah,
of the book. But then interesting to me also is she sets it in a smaller town. So we're in Kimberley when we start off this book,
yes,
whereas we have this very strong Joburg rat race, millennial Joburg, social media Joburg feeling in the previous two books. So we have a little bit of a small town bubble
mm,
for a season in this third book, which I also found a little bit refreshing as well,
yeah. You
because
slow down a bit.
yeah, and it
Yeah.
also tones down the infamy around who the Zulu guys are and that kind of thing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I completely enjoyed that as well. And just how it slows us down a bit, especially Kimberly and some of the Rustenburg parts of the book, really brought it home for me, and also justifies who Naledi is, because she comes from a very cultured background, and those golden bits and pieces throughout the story, I think, really kind of settle her character really well. I particularly enjoyed her millennial side, her snappy responses. I think that really brought some energy to the narrative that I think Hlomu and Zandile probably didn't have much of. But agree with you as well. It kind of echoes how we felt when going through Hlomu, just in terms of energy, in terms of pace, in terms of how their love story unfolds. You really start being invested in, oh my God, will this guy text back? What about that 250 Rand, or where will this story actually go? So Dudu really hooks you at the beginning of their love story with that. And it's just an unconventional way for them to meet, being parked in.
Yeah.
So also the humor that came through in their story really, really grabbed me. It had me just turning the pages.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I'm it was kind of like throwing off some of the heaviness. So I really agree with you. I loved
Mm,
the humor.
mm,
And then the just to now have a moment for Naledi herself. Now she is a woman with the purpose. When we meet her, she is the most fully formed of the wives at this point, right?
mm.
Because when you compare Zandile uh, and Hlomu, they both fell in love with these guys when they were young, like 19, 20,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So they've known nothing else.
Yeah,
Um,
Naledi's much
in
more
terms of
established.
yeah.
Yeah,
Whereas Naledi is more established. She's a woman with a past. She's got the creepy ex, and we meet that's who we know. Like Dudu does a very good job of fleshing out who she is, giving us the
yes,
layers,
yes.
helping us to understand. And so I found that refreshing. And I found
Yeah.
that interesting because one of my initial questions was, um, how will a woman like this navigate the overbearing lover sort of type that the
Mm,
Zulu brothers are?
yeah,
I mean, they're all feisty women. And
yeah,
just like the rest of them, she does start off feisty. But then there's, I think, an element of danger these men carry that always seems to subdue that to a certain extent in the
yeah.
women.
It disarms them
Um,
a bit. Yeah,
yeah. So I really enjoyed that about Naledi. She's fully formed.
yeah,
Her vices are clear from the
yeah. And just
get-go.
to add on that point, I really like how, I think we had a bit of a taste of this with Hlomu, where we dive into Sandile as a character in her life that might impact her relationship with Mkhele. And with Naledi, it's not just the creepy ex, but it's Tsietsi as well, and the dad as well, and the dad's
Yeah.
expectations. So I like how, they created breadth in what kind of influence actually comes into their love story and what that would
Mhm.
mean for Kawe, and how, like you say, how he now needs to, well, how the love story will navigate those situations that Naledi comes with. So that very, very refreshing. I enjoyed that
Mm.
part as well.
Mm. And I also liked and the thing is her dad is quite an interesting. So, in terms of father figures, the men themselves, interesting. And then they've
Yeah.
got their own trauma, with their own dad.
Yes.
And their own issues trying to navigate being fathers with their children, with the choices that they've made, some of which they can't undo, and they can't come back from. And then her dad, if I compare it with Hlomu's dad and then Zandile's dad issues, which were quite rough, is a very interesting guy because there's a strength in him that I can't say I found in the other two girls' dads.
Mm,
And there's a danger in him that it's quite nice to see the woman come with somebody who's dangerous of on his own in his own right with
yeah.
her, which kind of I think for me is nice because you almost hope that it will level the playing field in the
Mm,
dynamic between her and her lover. So I found that very, very interesting because
yeah.
the when we discover what he has done for her and how he has dealt with certain issues for her, I'm like, wow, that was interesting. I wouldn't condone it, but it's a book about the Zulu brothers. So
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to go down. That's going to be illegal, violent,
Yes.
and kind of dramatic like that. We've
Yeah.
got Upenyu Makoni Mchemwa joining us, and she says the Hlomu series is now a television series. Is so by the book. So I would say, because you and I wanted to talk about this, and we're going to talk about it properly next week. I would say that I am happy. I haven't started watching the series. I was so excited when it came out
Yeah.
on Showmax, and I was like, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, and I've been following closely on Instagram, following Dudu and the different characters. Interested to see the actors they chose for the
Yes.
brothers, but
Yes.
I am happy that I'm reading the book first, or reading the books
Yeah.
first before
Yeah.
I go to the TV series. Have you watched the TV series yet?
I have. You have 40 episodes to catch up on, Selena. But it will be a good binge session for you. It's been an interesting time. There's been a lot of contention around who's cast for which character, how the story has played out, and um, the phrase "inspired by" the
Mm,
books and not completely reverberating what is on each page. So that has been quite controversial
mm.
in how the series has played out. And actually, the next, I think part two, which is the next 40 episodes focusing on Zandile, is kicking off tomorrow.
Okay.
So you have a whole season to catch up on, essentially, and then you'll jump onto season two as it plays. But I'm quite excited to dive into that as well. I think there's lots to talk about in how the series was then, the book series was emulated into a telenovela.
Yeah.
Lots of interesting parts about that. And I also really enjoyed how verbal Dudu has been about that process and introducing us to the characters, introducing us to the way we should expect the plot to play out. I think, that involvement of the author in the social media world that we live in is so crucial. Just to
Mm,
manage our expectations as fans of the book series
mm.
versus us, honing in on our imaginations and how it will play out in a telenovela. Obviously, or the production obviously cannot, attest to all of our imaginations. We all have a different
Mm.
view of who this person is and what this will look like. So I think a level of compromise is needed from us, and giving the guys some grace will go a long way. But enjoying it so far. It's really fantastic. I am loving it.
Okay, well, I won't promise to watch all 40 episodes by next week Wednesday, but I'll definitely squeeze a few in. So for our discussion next week Wednesday around the book. But I do agree with you. I find Dudu very savvy as a publisher, a producer, so like a media owner in her own right.
Mm,
She really expands the depth of, or the breadth really, of what an author is in today's world.
yes.
And I think as a Black woman, a Black South African woman, she self-published these books. They were a hit, regardless of, I think a few things that, could have been done better. They were still a hit.
Mm,
And they were, I think, she managed to capitalize the sleeper hitness of the first book, which remains, I think, a cult mainstay to today.
mm,
And so she rode that wave well. She was able to convert to broadcast, and the way that she has championed it on social media shows a sense of ownership. I think that 20 years ago, regardless of race, would not have been there for people who created books that had to convert to wherever. They were
yeah.
never as vocal. They were never as well seen. So I find that savvy very respectful. I think it's timeous. I think it's the
Mm,
moment that we're in right now, and I really respect that power. And
yeah.
so that's really, really amazing. But you and I spoke about this at the beginning of this live about
Yeah.
like, are we going to have enough time for Naledi? But we've come to the end of our time today, folks. But if you've got thoughts on book two, please share in the comments. We'll definitely pick them up as we do book 3 and 4. If you want to read along with us, hop onto Amazon. The books are very affordable on Kindle. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you can get them for free. But if you don't, they're very, very affordable. If you're in Joburg, look them up online, and they're available in quite a few booksellers. So
Yeah.
definitely get book 3 and 4. And even if you want to catch up, read books 1 to 3. I mean, we're always up for the conversation. We will definitely, there's no way we can talk about the any of the books without referring to the older books. So
Yeah.
we'll be right there with you. We'll be right there for you as we have our next conversation next week. And so that was today's book club in the month of love. And we thought we'd go with some favorite love stories of you all. And that's the Hlomu series. So we've had a little chat about Zandile more than we have had about Naledi. But I think maybe I can say we both enjoyed Naledi a little bit more than Zandile. So we'll
Yeah.
be happy to touch more on that next week. If you've got questions, if you want to read along with us, please, you can follow Ntombi. You can follow her on Ibuku on YouTube, or you can follow us both on Facebook and Instagram, and you can watch these pages for those handles. So it's been good to be with you. If you're in Joburg, enjoy the rain, be it cozy, and thank you, Ntombi, so much for spending this time with us. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Selina. I always find these sessions very lovely and wholesome. I look forward to next week.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Bye, guys. Good night.
Bye.